My wife came home from work with kiss marks on her neck. The lipstick smeared on the collar of her blouse, the smell of a perfume that wasn't hers, that definitely wasn't mine. I didn't need to ask. I didn't need to investigate. I didn't need to waste nights trying to put together pieces that, deep down, were already assembled before my eyes. The bitter taste of betrayal exploded in my mouth the moment I saw her walk through the door, laughing, fixing her hair as if nothing had happened. As if my life, our life, wasn't falling apart right there, in front of me. I didn't bother pretending I didn't notice. I wasn't the husband who waits, who tries to understand, who asks silly questions like, "Where have you been?" or, "What does that mean?" No. I got straight to the point. I pointed to the marks on her neck, my voice cold, steady, a tone I barely recognized myself. You go to work and come home with kiss marks on your neck. It's all over between us. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just threw the weight of those words on her, a weight she never imagined carrying. Custody of our children will remain with me. It was only then that she stopped smiling. It was only then that shock crossed his face, his skin turning pale, his lips parting in a wordless sigh. She tried to deny it, because that's what traitors do. It's not at all what you think. Her voice trembling, hurried, desperate. But I already knew. Betrayal has a smell, it has a taste, it has a palpable presence in the air. I felt it before I even saw it. My heart had already warned me. She swallowed hard, took a step back, perhaps hoping that I would step back too, that I would give space to her lies. But I didn't. The silence weighed between us. Our children played upstairs, oblivious to the devastation taking place on the ground floor. And then came the question she couldn't answer, was it worth it? His eyes widened. She blinked quickly, as if she could ward off the truth that was approaching like a storm. His voice trailed off. Nothing she said would change the fact that, that night, she was no longer the woman I loved. She was a stranger. A distorted reflection of someone who, until that moment, I swore I knew. And the worst was yet to come. It wasn't just about me. It wasn't just about the marriage she had destroyed with her own actions. It was about them. Our children. How could I look at them and pretend everything was fine? How could I allow them to grow up in a home built on lies, on broken promises? She tried to get closer, maybe to touch me, to find some trace of the man who would forgive her. But that man no longer existed. You can't do that. The sentence escaped her in a whisper. As if she had any control over the situation. As if she still had the right to demand something. I laughed. A short, dry, humorless laugh. I already did. She cried. She cried as if she were the victim, as if she were being ripped away from a home where she was happy. But tears don't erase lipstick marks, nor the smell of another man impregnated on the skin. They don't undo kisses, they don't delete hidden messages, they don't redo vows that were thrown in the trash. The pain of betrayal is not like any other pain. It is cold and sharp, like a sharp blade buried too deep to be removed without leaving scars. It steals the air, sucks the color from the world, turns every memory into an unbearable poison. But there is something even worse. Something that hit me like a punch in the gut, something that made my blood run cold more than her betrayal. Our children listened. The door to the upstairs bedroom creaked. Timid footsteps descended the stairs. Little innocent eyes watched us from the threshold, taking in every fragment of our misfortune. A thick silence took over the environment. I saw them trying to understand, trying to put together the pieces of the adult puzzle that should never have been undone before them. What do you do when betrayal doesn't just hurt you? When your children's eyes light up not with joy, but with confusion and fear? What do you do when you realize that no matter how much you love them, they will never look at their mother the same way again? She tried to compose herself, wiping her tears with the back of her hands, trying to hide the destruction written on her face. But it was already too late. Their eyes were fixed on her, as if they were seeing a monster where before there was only love. And in that instant, I knew. I learned that, more than anything, the true punishment for cheating is not divorce. It's not the divided assets, the endless discussions, the legal battles. The true punishment does not come from me, nor from the world. It comes from the eyes of those who matter most. Because what she did will not be erased. It will not be forgotten. And no matter how much time passes, children never forgive a mother who disappoints them. Never. Welcome to the channel. Here, betrayal is not glamorized or romanticized. We do not support, justify or encourage infidelity. All the stories are fictional, but they carry an undeniable truth: betrayal destroys lives, families and hearts. Get ready, because what you're about to hear isn't just a story, it's a reality check. Now, sit back, take a deep breath and prepare yourself for an intense narrative, where every action has its consequences. Good story. Lucas has always been a man who valued balance. From an early age, he understood that building a solid family required more than just love, it took effort, commitment and, above all, respect. Ever since he met Anna, he knew she would be his life partner. She was radiant, determined, and had a smile that made everything around her seem lighter. When they got married, they promised that they would never let routine consume what they had. And, for a long time, they managed to keep that promise. They had 2 wonderful children, a stable home and shared dreams. Their marriage was admired by friends, respected by family. They were not a perfect couple, but they faced every obstacle together, further strengthening the bond that united them. Life, however, has a subtle way of testing the firmest foundations. Lucas worked as a manager at a logistics company, a role that required time and responsibility. He often arrived home late, tired, carrying the weight of difficult decisions, but he never stopped paying attention to his wife and children. Anna, in turn, had built a solid career in the administrative area of a large company. She was always dedicated to her work, but her priority was her family. She balanced between meetings, deadlines and commitments, but still found time to organize family dinners, help with schoolwork and plan moments together with Lucas. To anyone looking from the outside, they seemed to have everything under control. Time, however, shapes relationships in unexpected ways. Over the years, the enthusiasm that once defined their marriage began to fade into routine. The small gestures of affection gave way to comfortable, and then uncomfortable, silences. The conversations, once long and full of complicity, became superficial. Anna missed the sparkle in Lucas's eyes that had once been there, and he, in turn, noticed that his wife's spontaneous laughter was becoming increasingly rare. But neither of them talked about it. Perhaps because they both believed that these changes were natural, that true love resisted the wear and tear of time without needing constant reassurance. There were nights when Lucas watched her sleeping and tried to remember the last time they had truly looked into each other's eyes. He wondered if she felt the same way, if she also noticed the distance that, like a fog, had settled between them. But I always pushed these thoughts away, believing that all it took was a little more patience, a little more effort, for everything to return to normal. He still loved her, he was sure of that, but sometimes he felt like he was fighting alone to hold on to something that was slipping through his fingers. Anna, on the other hand, also noticed that something inside her was changing. He loved his family, he loved the life they built together, but sometimes he felt a restlessness he couldn't explain. On some nights, after Lucas was asleep, she would sit in the living room, staring into space, as if she were searching within herself for an answer to the feeling of absence that haunted her. It wasn't unhappiness, but it wasn't fulfillment either. It was an undefined space between what I had and what I felt I could have. The children were the strongest connection between them, which kept the dynamics of the house working. They were happy, intelligent children, and Lucas made a point of being present in each achievement, in each challenge. He was an exemplary father, and Anna admired that about him. But at the same time, she sometimes found herself wishing he would show the same dedication to his marriage. Not that he didn't try, but there was a subtle difference between being physically present and actually being present. The days repeated themselves with mechanical precision. Lucas left early for work, Anna divided herself between meetings and household chores, the children followed their school routines. On weekends, they tried to make up for lost time, going out for lunch with their family, watching movies on the couch, but there was an invisible distance between them, something they both felt but didn't verbalize. The fear of confronting what could be wrong was greater than the need to resolve it. So they just continued. Anna's work environment was dynamic, full of challenges and responsibilities that kept her busy. She was one of the best employees in the industry, someone her superiors trusted to solve problems, find solutions, and manage impossible deadlines. He liked what he did, but lately he noticed that his mind wandered more than it should. Small details distracted her, small interactions that perhaps didn't matter so much to others, but that seemed to take on a different weight for her. She started looking more in the mirror before leaving the house, choosing her clothes and perfume more carefully. Details that seemed harmless, but indicated a change that was imperceptible even to herself. Lucas, in turn, began to notice that Anna was further away. He didn't know exactly when it started, but he suddenly noticed that the conversations between them were shorter, that her gaze always seemed to be somewhere beyond him. He tried to convince himself that it was just tiredness, stress from work, accumulated responsibilities. But deep down, something in him felt like it was more than that. Something inside him said he was losing Anna, but he didn't want to admit it. I didn't want to think about that possibility. The couple's friends also began to notice the change. They commented among themselves that Lucas and Anna weren't like they used to be, that something in their energy seemed different. They didn't fight, they didn't argue, but they also didn't look like the couple they once were. Gestures of affection were rare, smiles more restrained. And, when asked, both responded with a simple, "We're fine," leaving no room for further questioning. Lucas started trying harder to bring them back together. He planned a romantic dinner at a restaurant they used to go to in the early years of their marriage. He bought flowers, made reservations, wanted to surprise her. Anna smiled when she received the invitation, but there was something about the way she reacted that bothered him. It wasn't surprise, it wasn't genuine emotion, it was more polite acceptance. During dinner, he tried to bring up topics that would make them remember old times, he wanted to make her laugh, he wanted to see that sparkle in her eyes that had once been his alone. And, for a moment, he did. But it was only for an instant. That night, when they returned home, they lay down side by side, as they did every night. Lucas tried to pull her closer, tried to start something more intimate, but Anna turned away, muttering, "I'm tired." He didn't insist. He just stood there, with his eyes open, feeling the weight of something he couldn't name, but he knew it was there. Something was changing. He just didn't know how much yet. In recent months, Lucas began to notice subtle but constant changes in Anna. Small details that might have gone unnoticed by a less attentive man, but that to him, who had spent years observing every nuance of his wife's face and behavior, were clear as day. She started spending more time on her cell phone, always laughing at messages he never saw. She became more careful when getting ready for work, choosing clothes that she previously reserved for special occasions, more intense perfumes, and subtle but meticulously applied makeup. Their schedules also began to extend, a few extra meetings here and there, corporate events that had never been so frequent. At first, he didn't question it. He gave space, respected, tried to believe that it was just a phase, a new job requirement. But something inside him wouldn't allow him to ignore the nagging feeling that something was wrong. Family dinners became silent. Anna looked at her cell phone more than at her children, she responded to Lucas with monosyllables, she looked away when he tried to establish a deeper conversation. Touch between them became rare, kisses in the morning were replaced by quick waves, the nights when they used to lie down together talking until sleep came gave way to constant excuses. She was always tired, always overwhelmed, always distant. The void between them grew like an insurmountable abyss, and no matter how much Lucas tried to reach her, he felt that she was already too far away. It was on an ordinary night, after a long day of work, that he felt the first twinge of the certainty that he had been trying to deny for a long time. Anna arrived late, later than usual. His clothes, despite being neat, had suspicious creases, the intense perfume mixed with a strange smell, a sweet and masculine trail at the same time. She avoided his gaze, walked straight down the hall, muttering a hurried greeting. Lucas watched her disappear into the room, her movements tense, as if she was carrying something she didn't want him to see. She felt her stomach churn, a mixture of anxiety and a primal fear she had never experienced before. He went to the kitchen, poured himself a glass of water, trying to calm his mind that was already drawing scenarios that he wasn't ready to accept yet. The following days only reinforced his suspicions. The meetings continued to last longer, the dinners became even more scarce, and Anna seemed to be present only physically, like a ghost inside her own house. Her silence screamed, her apologies sounded increasingly empty. But Lucas didn't want to confront her without proof, without something concrete. What he feared was too big to be thrown to the wind like any other assumption. I needed to know the truth. He needed to face whatever was happening, no matter how much every fiber of his being wished it was all just a figment of his mind. On Friday night, Anna announced that she would have a business dinner and would be back late. Her tone was rehearsed, the justification came too quickly, as if it had already been repeated to herself before being said. Lucas simply nodded, trying to keep his expression neutral. Once she left, he waited a few minutes before grabbing his car keys and leaving as well. He didn't know exactly what he was doing, nor what he expected to find, but something inside him guided him, an insatiable need to discover the truth, to remove the doubts that consumed him. He followed the path he knew was his wife's usual route, but instead of turning onto the main avenue, he noticed that her car took another direction. He kept his distance, his heart beating fast, his hands gripping the steering wheel harder than necessary. At every corner, at every traffic light, the tension in his chest increased. She parked in front of a discreet restaurant, far from the center, far from the corporate environment where she was supposed to be. He saw her get out of the car, adjust her hair in the reflection in the window, check her cell phone and smile before getting in. And it was there, standing inside the car, with his fingers cold on the steering wheel, that Lucas felt the first real blow of betrayal. Because she wasn't just going out for a business dinner. She was meeting someone. And that someone wasn't him. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to remain calm. I wanted to see more. He needed to be sure, even though the certainty was already rubbing against his chest like a sharp blade. He decided to wait. The minutes passed slowly, each second a torment. Then, after almost 2 hours, Anna left. And she wasn't alone. A man at her side, too close, his hand gently running down her back, an intimate touch, a familiarity that shouldn't exist. She laughed, leaning slightly towards him as she spoke, her eyes shining in a way Lucas hadn't seen in a long time. And then, it happened. The kiss. Quick but decisive. A seal of intimacy that dispelled any remaining doubt. Lucas closed his eyes for a moment, as if he could erase the scene from his memory. But it was already too late. The betrayal was there, naked and raw, in front of him. No room for excuses, no room for denial. The world around him seemed to slow down. The sound of cars, the city lights, everything became a distant blur. Only that image remained clear, etched in his mind like an eternal scar. The woman he loved, the woman he believed he knew, wrapped in another man's arms. The pain was immediate, but it wasn't just anger. It was desolation. It was the weight of every broken promise, of every night alone waiting for someone who no longer belonged to him. Lucas didn't know how long he stayed there, watching. Only when he felt the bitter taste of despair rising in his throat did he realize that he needed to get out of there before he did something he would regret. He started the car and drove back home, aimlessly, without feeling his own movements. The path seemed longer than ever, and the only thing that filled the empty space around him was the certainty that his life would never be the same. When Anna arrived later that night, she found Lucas sitting in the living room, in the dim light, a half-empty glass of whiskey in his hand, his gaze lost. She hesitated at the door, as if she sensed something was different, as if her intuition screamed that the ground beneath her feet was about to crumble. He tried to smile, tried to act natural, but he couldn't hide the tension in his voice when he murmured a simple, "Hi." Lucas didn't respond right away. He just watched her, letting the silence drag between them, heavy, suffocating. Then, without changing his tone of voice, without showing any emotion other than deep tiredness, he said the words that would change everything. "How was your business dinner?" Her gaze wavered. Small details betrayed her, the rigidity of her shoulders, the subtle deviation of her eyes, the delay in responding. But Lucas already knew the truth. He had seen her. And now, it was only a matter of time before she realized that nothing would ever be the same. Lucas remained sitting in the living room, the glass of whiskey now abandoned on the table, his eyes fixed on Anna as if trying to see through her. She remained there, standing in the doorway, hesitant, her fingers playing with the strap of her bag, her breathing held back. The silence between the two wasn't just uncomfortable, it was oppressive, as if every second carried the weight of everything that hadn't yet been said. He repeated the question, his voice steady, no rush, no anger, just a dark calm that made her stomach turn. "How was your business dinner?" Anna's heart beat faster, her mind trying to calculate the correct answer, something that was plausible enough to erase any suspicion. But Lucas's gaze didn't blink, it didn't waver, it was a sharp blade ready to cut any lie that escaped her lips. She tried to maintain her composure, straightened her hair, forced a weak smile before replying that it had been a tiring dinner, that her boss prolonged the meeting longer than necessary and that she just wanted to take a shower and sleep. Lucas leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees, his eyes still locked on her, studying every movement, every nuance of her expression. Then he laughed, but it was a dry, humorless laugh, a low sound that made Anna shudder. He said it was funny how business meetings were becoming more and more intimate, how funny it was that corporate dinners ended with kisses in the parking lot. Anna's face turned pale. The impact of those words hit like a sharp blow, and for a moment, she couldn't breathe. The ground beneath his feet seemed to disappear. He tried to deny it, he tried to laugh along, but nothing came out. Just silence. Lucas stood up slowly, walked towards her, stopping a few centimeters away. He said he had seen her. That there were no more doubts, that it was no longer a suspicion, it was no longer paranoia. He saw her. He saw the way she looked at that man, he saw the way she leaned towards him, he saw her lips touch his without hesitation. He asked if she could at least have the decency to admit it. Anna opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her gaze was glazed over, her chest rising and falling unevenly. His hands shook at his sides. Lucas didn't look away. There was no more room for pretense. He wanted the truth. After a long silence, she finally mumbled an apology. But the words sounded empty, weak, weightless. Lucas laughed again, shaking his head, saying that apologies didn't change anything, didn't erase what he saw, didn't bring back the trust she had destroyed. He asked how long this had been going on. Anna hesitated, her eyes shining with tears that she tried to hold back, and then she murmured that it didn't make any difference, that she didn't want to hurt him, that it was a mistake. Lucas exploded. Didn't it make a difference? His voice rose, filled with disbelief. He repeated the question, demanding an answer. How long? With whom? How did it start? She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, knew there was no longer any escape. A month. Maybe 2. She said it meant nothing, that it was a moment of weakness, that she was confused. But Lucas didn't want lame excuses, he didn't want empty justifications. He wanted to understand. He asked if she loved the other man. Anna shook her head too quickly, urgently denying it, saying no, never, that it was just a mistake. But Lucas didn't believe it. He asked why she did that. If he was unhappy, why didn't he say so? If you needed something more, why didn't you try to fix it? Anna let out a sob, her body shaking, her teary eyes finally meeting his. He said he didn't know how to respond, that he never planned it, that it just happened. Lucas ran his hands through his hair, laughing humorlessly, repeating under his breath that things don't just happen. Choices are made. Decisions are made. She chose. The anger inside him began to build, but it wasn't a blind fury. It was a crushing pain, a feeling of being deceived, of being replaced, of being a stranger in one's own home. He said she didn't just cheat on him. She betrayed the family they built, she betrayed her children, she betrayed everything they promised each other. He asked her how she could lie next to him every night after being with another man. How could she look their children in the eye and pretend everything was okay? Anna sobbed, saying she never wanted to hurt him. But Lucas shook his head, saying that she did, yes. Because no one cheats without knowing the consequences. She knew. And he did it anyway. And then, he said the words that made her pain turn physical. He couldn't stay there. I couldn't look at her and see someone else. I couldn't live in a house where everything was a lie. I was going away. I was going to ask for a divorce. Anna's eyes widened, panic written all over her face. He tried to hold it, tried to beg, saying that they could get through it, that they could find a way, that the love was still there. But Lucas looked at her as if she were a complete stranger. He said that love without respect was worthless. That broken trust cannot be rebuilt. And the worst part of it all was that it wasn't just between them. It wasn't just their marriage that was at stake. It was then that he dropped the bomb that ripped the floor from beneath her feet. The children knew. They had heard the argument. They had heard every word, every accusation, every confession. And now, they no longer looked at her the same way. He saw it in their eyes. The glow of innocence that existed before had been erased by the brutal reality of what she did. She didn't just cheat on a husband. She betrayed a family. He betrayed his own children. Anna collapsed to the floor, hands over her face, her body shaking with uncontrollable sobs. Lucas just watched her. Not in anger, not in hate. Only with immeasurable regret. Because, in the end, her worst punishment wouldn't be divorce. It would not be the separation of assets. It wouldn't be missing the wedding. The real punishment was knowing that her children would never look at her the same way again. That they would never feel the same pride again. That the hurt in their eyes would be an eternal reminder of the mistake she made. And that, Lucas knew, was a punishment she would carry forever. Anna remained on the floor, her knees bent, her body shaking with silent sobs. His eyes were wide, red, swollen, but his mind seemed unable to fully process the weight of what Lucas had just said. Her chest heaved uncontrollably, as if she were trying to take in the air she was lacking, but nothing was filling the growing emptiness inside her. The children knew. That was the part that destroyed her, that made her feel like something inside her had been brutally ripped away. He tried to hold on to any hope, any shred of normalcy, but everything was falling apart around him. He raised his face slowly, desperately searching for something in Lucas's eyes, any sign of hesitation, any indication that this could be fixed, but all he found was distance, coldness, an invisible and insurmountable wall between them. Lucas watched her without saying anything, his arms crossed, his expression impassive. He didn't move, he didn't show emotion, and it was worse than if he had been screaming. He had already given up. I had already decided. When he spoke again, his voice was low, but carried with a weight that Anna felt directly in her stomach. He said there was nothing more to be said between them. That she could cry, she could beg, but nothing would erase what was done. That, to her children, she was no longer the same mother they had known. That trust was something difficult to rebuild and that, sometimes, there was simply no way back. Anna shook her head, murmuring that he was wrong, that the children were young, that with time everything would be resolved. But Lucas's expression hardened. He said he could accept losing his marriage, but he would never allow his children to grow up believing that this was normal. That betrayal was forgivable, that a family could move on without scars after something like this. And that he would never let them be forced to live a lie. The pain on Anna's face turned into despair. She stood up abruptly, advancing towards Lucas, trying to grab his arms, forcing him to look her in the eyes, to see something that could save her from that abyss. She said she still loved him, that nothing changed what they had experienced, that making a mistake didn't erase years of history. But Lucas pulled away, taking her hands off him with a quick movement, as if her touch burned him. His voice came out sharp, raw. He asked her since when she thought love was enough to keep something standing when everything that supported the base was destroyed. He asked how many nights she had come home, looked into his eyes, into her children's eyes, and slept peacefully, knowing what she was doing. He asked how she could dare talk about love after having chosen someone who wasn't him. Anna broke down again. The tears returned, intense, uncontrolled. She wanted to explain, she wanted to find words that could ease the pain she saw on his face, but Lucas wasn't there anymore. Not in the way that mattered. He grabbed his car keys, took a deep breath and announced that he would leave the house that night. I wouldn't sleep there, I couldn't. He said that the next day he would come back to pick up some things and that after that they would sort out the details of the divorce. When Anna tried to protest, insisting that the children needed them together, Lucas just laughed, a bitter, lifeless laugh, saying that the children needed parents who were role models, and that she had failed at that. The sound of the door slamming as he left echoed through the house like thunder. Anna felt a chill run up her spine, as if the world was imploding around her. She ran upstairs, hoping to find her children sleeping, to pretend, even if just for a few minutes, that nothing had changed. But when he opened the door to their room, he found only darkness and silence. The oldest was sitting on the bed, his eyes fixed on the floor, his expression unreadable. The youngest, curled up in the blankets, pretended to be sleeping, but the subtle shaking of his shoulders revealed that he wasn't as oblivious as she would have liked. Anna tried to smile, tried to say something that sounded normal, but the words stuck in her throat. The older man glanced at her, his face closed, and then he murmured something that cut deeper than anything Lucas had said. He asked if she even thought about them before doing what she did. If at some point, when he was out, when he was with another man, he remembered that they existed. The silence that followed was worse than any scream. Anna's heart beat painfully in her chest, and all she could say was a weak apology, which died in the air before it even reached him. She stood there, standing at the door, not knowing whether to go in or out, not knowing how to correct something that was already lost. Finally, he murmured that everything would be okay, that they were still family. But the look she received from her son was empty, hard, filled with a disappointment she never imagined seeing. He just shook his head and lay down without saying anything else. Anna wanted to cry, she wanted to hold his hand, but she knew that at that moment, it wouldn't help. So he just closed the door slowly and walked to his own room, where Lucas's smell still permeated the pillow. She buried her face there and cried until exhaustion overcame her. The night seemed endless. Each second dragged on as if time refused to move forward. In the morning, he woke up to the sound of the front door opening. His heart quickened, the foolish hope that Lucas had returned to try to sort things out. But when he went downstairs, he only saw the suitcases he had left at the entrance, his eyes were cold, without any softness. He grabbed his car keys, walked past her without saying anything, and went upstairs to get some things. Anna tried to follow him, but her legs felt weak, unable to keep up with the distance he had already imposed between them. When he came down again, he was wearing different clothes, ready to leave. He stopped in front of her and took a deep breath before speaking. He said she needed to be strong, not for him, not for herself, but for her children. That now, any mistake from her would be worse, that every wrong move could push them further apart. That if he really cared about them, he should accept that nothing would ever be the same again. Anna tried to hold his hand, but Lucas moved away again. He said he didn't hate her, but that he would never be able to look at her again without remembering what happened. That I would never be able to go back to being who I was next to her. And now, all that mattered was moving forward. Then, without looking back, he opened the door and left. Anna stood there, her heart in pieces, watching the car disappear down the street. Inside the house, the silence seemed to scream, suffocating, unbearable. And it was there that he realized that his real punishment wasn't divorce, it wasn't loneliness. It was knowing that the love that once existed was now just a memory. That the children who once saw her as a hero now saw her as a stranger. And that nothing, absolutely nothing, could erase what had been done. Anna spent the next few days enveloped in oppressive silence. The house seemed bigger, emptier, as if Lucas' absence had taken away all the warmth that had once filled that space. Every corner of the home that had once been his refuge now seemed a cruel reminder of what he had lost. His smell still permeated the pillows, the closets had empty spaces where his clothes used to be, and the bathroom drawer where he kept his razor blade was now just an abandoned space. Everything there screamed his absence, and the worst thing was knowing that that absence wasn't temporary. It wasn't something a conversation could fix. It was permanent. It was irreversible. The children remained cold, distant. The eldest barely spoke to her, answering only what was necessary, remaining in the room most of the time. The youngest, although more sensitive, avoided her in an even more painful way. He no longer hugged her before bed, he didn't seek her company to tell her about his day at school, he looked at her with a weight in his eyes that she had never seen before. Her children's silence hurt more than any scream, more than any accusation Lucas could have thrown at her. They were there, but it was as if she had become invisible to them. As if now she was just someone who shared the same roof, but who no longer deserved to be called mother. She tried to insist. He invited them to dinner, made each of their favorite dishes, set the table as if he could recreate an atmosphere of normality. But the children arrived late, sat down without enthusiasm, and ate in silence. Anna searched each one with her gaze, waiting for any sign of opening, but she only received a sharp distance. When the older man finally raised his eyes and looked at her, his voice came low, but with a weight that crushed her. He asked her if she really thought food would solve anything. If she believed that a dinner would make them forget what she did. Anna's heart sank in her chest, and she wanted to respond, she wanted to explain, but she realized that there was no answer that her children would accept. Not at that moment. Maybe never. Lucas was firm in his decision. I wouldn't go back. He showed up a few times to pick up his children, take them to spend time with him, and whenever he entered the house, he maintained an indifferent air, without even looking her in the eye. He looked fine. He didn't show anger, he didn't allow himself the slightest trace of weakness. He had moved on. And this realization made Anna feel the weight of guilt growing more and more inside her, crushing her little by little. At first she tried to fight it, tried to convince herself that there might still be a way back, but every door she tried to open only led her to the same dead end. Friends had also moved away. Before, the messages were frequent, the invitations to go out came spontaneously, but now, all she received was silence. It was as if she had been erased from the social circle that had previously been an essential part of her life. And perhaps it would have been. After all, no one likes to be next to someone who destroyed their own family. A few messages arrived, some people tried to comfort her without committing too much, saying that time would heal everything, that the children would one day understand. But Anna knew that time alone didn't heal anything. Time only exposed the wounds even more, revealing what had been done. There was no clear path to recovering what was lost. She tried to occupy her mind at work, immerse herself in reports and meetings as if she could hide from the chaos of her own life within spreadsheets and documents. But even there she couldn't feel whole. Conversations in the hallways seemed to stop as she passed by. Colleagues who previously brought up the topic now just gave a polite smile and moved on. She didn't need to hear it to know what they were saying. Everyone already knew about the separation. And with that came the judgmental looks, the whispers. To many, she was just another woman who threw everything away over a stupid mistake. And that was exactly how she felt. Worst of all, however, was not the loneliness. It wasn't the contempt of his children, nor the withdrawal from his friends. The worst thing was realizing that, as much as I wanted to go back in time, I couldn't. She could start over, she could try to rebuild her life, but she would never erase what she did. I would never change the way my children look. She would never make Lucas see her the way he used to. This was definitive. And the pain of that gnawed at her from the inside out. One afternoon, he received a message from Lucas. A simple, objective message. He informed us that he would file divorce papers in the next few days and that he preferred everything to be resolved without unnecessary hassle. He said the children could decide who they preferred to be with. No mention of the past, no opening for deeper conversation. Just a formality. An official end. Anna stared at the cell phone screen for long minutes, as if she could find something between the lines, but there was nothing other than what was there. Lucas didn't want to fight anymore. He wanted to move on. Night came, and Anna found herself sitting in the living room, staring into space. The children were in the room, locked in their own worlds, and she was there, alone, immersed in her own ruin. He took out his cell phone, opened the photo gallery, scrolled through the happy moments that were once part of his life. There were records of trips, birthdays, spontaneous smiles. And then, suddenly, these images seemed to belong to someone else, another version of herself that no longer existed. How had she allowed everything to get to this point? How could she be so blind that she didn't realize she was about to lose everything? It was at that moment that he heard footsteps coming down the stairs. Her heart quickened slightly, and she looked up, seeing her eldest son standing there, hesitant but present. He watched her, and for a moment Anna felt hope. But then he took a deep breath and said something that broke her even more. He said he would live with Lucas. That he had already talked to his father, that he had already decided. He said he could no longer live there, in that suffocating environment, that he didn't want to see his mother wallowing in regret every day. He said he didn't hate her, but he couldn't look at her the same way anymore. Anna tried to argue, tried to say that he was still part of her, that she loved him more than anything, but he just shook his head and said it wasn't about love. It was about respect. And that one, she had lost. The door to the youngest son's room opened, and he appeared in the hallway, hesitantly. His eyes were teary, confused. He looked at his brother, then at his mother, and Anna realized that he was also torn. I felt like he wanted to stay, but he also wanted to go. I felt that he was still too young to make that decision, but that the pain inside him was too great to ignore. He didn't say anything. He just lowered his head and went back to the room, closing the door behind him. Anna felt her chest tighten, the tears coming back with force. The eldest son remained still for a few seconds, as if waiting for her to say something, anything. But there was nothing more to be said. He had already made his decision. Then, without further ado, he turned and went up the stairs again, leaving Anna alone in the room, immersed in the definitive consequence of her own mistakes. And, for the first time since it all began, she realized that the cruelest punishment didn't come from Lucas, nor from her friends, nor from the world. It came from their own children. And that, she knew, was the pain she would carry forever. Anna felt the weight of every second she spent in that house, now transformed into an empty shell of what had once been a home. The silence was absolute, broken only by the subtle sounds of the mechanical routine he tried to maintain. But nothing was the same. The eldest son was no longer there, and the youngest, although he still slept under the same roof, seemed absent in a way that hurt more than anything else. He closed himself in his room, avoided conversations, and when he was finally forced to answer something, He did so in short, monosyllabic sentences, as if each word spoken to her was an unbearable effort. Anna tried to pretend that there was still a semblance of normality, but the truth was cruel and impossible to ignore. She was alone. Time seemed to flow in a strange way, the days passed without her knowing exactly what she had done with them. Work was no longer a refuge. Each task completed was just an interval between moments of emptiness. In the company's corridors, people seemed to measure their words when speaking to her, and Anna felt the heavy gazes on her. Some were of pity, others of judgment, but the worst of all was realizing that, for many, she was no longer the same person. His name, once associated with competence and confidence, was now whispered between side conversations, weighed down by the weight of his personal ruin. She didn't need to hear clearly to know what they were saying. She knew that her story had spread, that Lucas was seen as a man who had done everything right and that she, in turn, was the one who destroyed her own family on a whim. And maybe on some level it was true. That night, sitting on the sofa in the living room, looking at the turned-off television, Anna heard footsteps on the stairs. The youngest son came down slowly, his hands in the pockets of his sweatshirt, his gaze avoidant. He sat down on one of the chairs at the dining table without saying anything, and Anna felt butterflies in her stomach. There was something about the way he breathed, like he was preparing to say something difficult. Her anguish grew as she waited for him to break the silence. And then he said, in a low but firm tone, that he wanted to live with Lucas too. The world seemed to spin around Anna in a disorienting way. The air caught in her throat, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't know what to say. He explained that he missed his brother, that at his father's house things seemed easier, lighter. He said he didn't want to see her sad, that he didn't hate her, but that he couldn't pretend that nothing had changed. He said he needed some time, that maybe things would get easier in the future, but for now he couldn't live there anymore. The words fell on Anna like incessant blows, each one opening a new wound, tearing away any illusion that she could regain the life she had before. She felt her eyes water, but she held back the tears. For the first time, he didn't beg, didn't try to convince him otherwise. He just nodded slowly, as if his own body was giving up the fight. He asked when he wanted to go, and the answer came without hesitation. On the weekend. Just a few more days, and she would be completely alone. In the days that followed, Anna tried to process the idea of a home without her children. The silence was difficult before, but now it seemed to become a black hole of absence. She created them, was present in every moment, every fever, every nightmare, every achievement. And now, they were leaving. Not because they were growing up, not because it was natural for them to pursue their own lives. But because they didn't want to be with her anymore. That was the most painful part. It wasn't separation, but rejection. The eldest son was the first to walk away, and now the youngest followed the same path. Anna couldn't shake the feeling that she was being erased from their lives, as if her every mistake was taking its final toll. When the weekend arrived, the house was filled with a different movement. Lucas showed up at the agreed time, parked in front of the house and rang the doorbell as if he were any visitor. He didn't come in anymore, he didn't go beyond the doorstep. The children came down with their backpacks and suitcases, and Anna observed every detail of that moment, trying to record in her memory the last time she would see them there. He tried to smile at the youngest, trying to offer some comfort, but he only gave a half wave before leaving. The oldest didn't even look back. When the door closed and the car drove off, Anna stood still for endless minutes, not knowing where to go, what to do. The silence was deafening. He walked to his children's room, looked at the made beds, forgotten toys, and books. It was a farewell scenario, but without any promise of return. She sat on the edge of the bed and finally let the tears fall, without any control. He cried for everything he lost, for everything he destroyed, for everything that would never be the same. In the days that followed, his routine became a mechanical cycle of waking up, going to work, returning home and staring into space. He stopped checking his cell phone waiting for messages. There was nothing. The children didn't care. Lucas didn't need to talk to her for anything other than necessary. The few times he tried to call, he received cold, disinterested responses, and after a while, he gave up. They needed space, and she needed to accept that. But accepting it didn't mean it hurt any less. At work, his performance began to decline. Deadlines began to slip through her fingers, meetings became tiring, and she found herself staring at the computer screen without being able to process the numbers and reports. Her boss called her in for a talk, asked her if something was wrong, if she needed some time. Anna denied it, saying she was just dealing with personal issues. But it was obvious that everyone knew. The dark circles under his eyes, the lost look in his eyes, the apathy with which he moved around the office revealed what words didn't need to explain. One sleepless night, she picked up her cell phone and started scrolling through social media. He avoided looking for Lucas, for fear of seeing something he didn't want. But eventually, his name came up. It was a photo of the children in a park, smiling, playing, with the simple caption, "A new phase." Anna felt her chest tighten. They looked fine. They were fine. Without her. This was the reality. She had become a closed chapter in their lives. And as much as it hurt, as much as I wanted to go back and retrace each step, I knew that time didn't grant second chances. He looked around, at the empty house, at the reflection in the mirror that no longer looked the same, and realized that he needed to find a way. Not to recover what he lost, but to survive what was left. And then, at that moment, Anna understood that her greatest punishment was not separation. It wasn't loneliness. It was knowing that even if her children forgave her one day, they would never look at her the same way again. And that was the pain that would never leave her. The months passed like a blur for Anna. The days blurred together, the nights were long, silent, and the house that once brimmed with life was now just a space where the echo of loneliness resonated louder than any sound. She tried to fill the time, tried to maintain the routine, but nothing filled the void. The children were gone, the marriage was over, and all that was left was the weight of what she herself had destroyed. There were no more unexpected messages, calls, voices calling for her. There was only one life that once belonged to someone who no longer existed. Lucas, on the other hand, moved on. His life took a new direction. He found comfort in his children, in his work, in the friends who remained by his side. He didn't allow the past to define him, he didn't carry bitterness with him. He chose to start over. Little by little, he began to open up to new possibilities, to new conversations, to new meetings. And then, it happened. Met someone. It wasn't planned, it wasn't a deliberate search for new love, but when he realized it, he was smiling again, feeling alive in a way he thought he'd never feel again. She was different from Anna in many ways, but the most important thing was that she didn't carry the scars of his past. She saw him for the man he was now, not for what he lost, not for what he suffered. And that was liberating. The children, in turn, found stability in their new life with their father. They still felt their mother's absence, but it was an absence they had learned to accept. It wasn't a nostalgia that made them want to return, but a memory of something that was once different. The oldest focused on his studies, on the future he wanted to build. The youngest, although he still had some confusion regarding his feelings for his mother, followed in his brother's footsteps. They grew, matured, and time, even though it didn't heal everything, helped them deal with the scars they carried. Anna, in turn, saw all this happen from a distance. With each photo posted on social media, with each short and cold conversation she had with her children, she realized that the world went on without her. He tried several times to recover what was lost, he tried to regain his children's trust, but all he received was resistance. The oldest refused any contact beyond what was strictly necessary. The youngest, even though he was more receptive, never looked at her the same way again. And the truth that hurt more than anything else was that she herself had caused all of this. It was something that could not be reversed, could not be erased. At work, things have also changed. The pressure increased, performance fell, and the woman who was once respected was now seen as someone who had lost her way. Mistakes became more frequent, concentration increasingly difficult. And then came the last consequence. She was called to a meeting with the board, where they informed her that, due to below-expected performance in recent months, they had decided to follow another path. She was dismissed. No children at home, no husband, no close friends, and now no job. What's left? She came home that day, and for the first time, she looked at herself in the mirror and didn't recognize herself. His tired face, his dull eyes, his posture bowed by the weight of everything he lost. He took out his cell phone and scrolled through the contacts. He thought about calling Lucas, but he knew it would be useless. He thought about sending a message to his children, but he knew it would be ignored or responded to indifferently. Loneliness was an endless hole, and now, there were no distractions to keep her from falling completely into it. It was then that, in a desperate attempt to find a semblance of normality, he decided to leave. He went to a cafe he used to go to before everything fell apart. She sat alone, watching the couples talking, the friends laughing, the families gathered together. She felt like a ghost in the middle of a world that went on without her. He ordered a coffee, but didn't even taste it. It was there, but at the same time, it was no longer there. As she stared at the cup in front of her, she heard a familiar voice call out to her. He looked up slowly and, to his surprise, it was Lucas. He was there, standing before her, and for a moment, she felt her heart race. I hadn't seen him in months. He felt different, lighter, more whole. And then, beside him, was the woman. The new woman. She was pretty, had a sweet look, and when she noticed Anna staring at them, she just smiled politely. Lucas hesitated for a moment before saying anything. There was a weight in the air, a past between them that would never cease to exist. He broke the silence with a simple greeting, asking how she was. Anna swallowed hard, forcing a weak smile. Said he was fine. But Lucas knew he wasn't. He always knew when she lied. The silence between them was short, but full of meaning. He then nodded, as if he understood something he had never said out loud, and wished her well. And then, holding the hand of the new woman at his side, he left the cafe. Anna remained there, motionless, observing the scene. There were no long goodbyes, there was no nostalgia, there was no trace of what once existed between them. There was only a buried past and a future that no longer included his name. She paid for the coffee she didn't drink and left the place. The cold night wind cut into his face, and for the first time, he didn't try to escape the feeling. That was it. The end of everything. And this time, there was no one to blame but herself. And now, I want to hear from you. What did you think of this story? Do you believe Anna got what she deserved? Or do you think everyone deserves a second chance? Comment your opinion and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more impactful stories like this. Here, we do not support treason on any level. Until next time.